I'm former WWE superstar, ECW star, TNA star, Al Snow, and I am doing part 2 of the shoot interview for Hannibal TV.
All right, so I am back with Al Snow, former WWE and TNA superstar and legendary trainer, I guess you could call him now. He's been one of our most popular shoot interviews we've ever done, so this is part 2.
Part 2?
Yeah. You speak French. I didn't know anyone from Kentucky spoke French.
They do.
But the other one was kind of in chronological order of your career. This will just be mostly random questions. Some of them are questions that came up in the comments of your other videos.
Okay.
And others are on general topics. But one question I've had a lot is you now look better than you ever did in the WWE. What have you been doing differently to develop this physique?
The biggest thing is I just changed how I train. I several years ago had started doing Muscle and Fitness had like a strongman workout. So it's a different way to train and very functional. A lot of compound movements and things, and I really enjoyed it. And so that got me interested in researching old-time strongmen, like from the late 1800s, early 1900s, and I started researching old-time wrestlers like Frank Gotch or George Hackenschmidt, Frank Gotch, people like that, and was amazed at how developed and how well built they were. Because they didn't know what calories were, they didn't know protein or anything like that as far as a diet was concerned, and I thought, I'm going to see what they do, and I'm going to start to train like they do. And a lot of what they do is functional or compound movements, ballistic movements, especially a lot of the Indian wrestlers. They do a lot of the mace and Indian clubs and things like that as far as ballistic training is concerned. And I just started doing all of that, and it's made a huge difference.
What's been the most beneficial exercise?
Doing my legs more than just once a week. And I'd say, really, to be quite honest, probably the most beneficial thing is varying, alternating, and as much as possible, not just doing one body part a day, which is the typical way, that a lot of people train. I'll do my whole body 3 or 4 times a week, a lot of times. And then some weeks I'll do one body part a day, and then some weeks I'll just do all body weight, and then some weeks I'll do all kettlebells, and then some weeks I've got a routine that I do, especially when I'm on the road, that I developed when I was in TNA, where it's a 30-minute challenge, and I'll basically hit every major muscle group, and I'll do 10 free squats, then I'll do 10 pull-ups or 10 rows, 5 on each side, dumbbell rows, 10 push-ups, and then 10 inverted shoulder presses, and then 10 dumbbell curls. So I'm basically hitting myself from head to toe. That's one round. I'll try to do at least 10 rounds in 30 minutes. If I push myself, I'll try to get 12 or 15 rounds in 30 minutes, which means I've done 100 reps on every body part. And I use moderate to slightly heavy weight along with body weight movements, or isolating movements, like with legs. I'll instead of just doing straight squats, I'll do pistol squats or lunges or things like that as well.
So for the people that claim that this is all just because you've started taking steroids, it's really not.
No, I take tests. I mean, I'm prescribed tests because I'm 55, but that in and of itself is not it. I wish it was. I wish that the common misconception is that you could just take a magic pill and then all of a sudden you could, like on TV, suddenly go like this. You can't. You've got to actually put in the work. And I train differently, I eat differently, and I train harder and than I've ever done before. And I enjoy it because it's a different way of training. And that's what's really led to the development. If I had, years before I had taken testosterone for a very short time because I had suffered from, and I don't really talk about it in public, but I had suffered from 2 strokes from a head injury, and I had atrophy down the entire side of my body, and I told the doctor, I said, what can I do to help that? He said, well, they'll probably prescribe you steroids. So I went to the doctor, they refused to do it, so I started to self-medicate to try to help to bring that part of me back. I never had that kind of development because I didn't do a lot of compound movements, didn't utilize my lower body, didn't train the way I train now. And that, regardless of what people might think, is really what has caused the change, is the fact that I train completely different than what I've ever done before. And I utilize my legs more than I have ever done.
Now, since the last time we spoke to you, you parted ways with Impact Wrestling. Can you explain what happened there? Just cutbacks?
No, just, in wrestling, it's not a matter of when, it's a matter of, or I should say it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when your run's going to come up. It doesn't matter where you go, what territory, what company, you're going to have a finite amount of time in those particular places. I had a great run there. I had a very decent one. Jeff Jarrett came back, brought in his own guys, which is not unusual for people to do. They've all done that for many, over decades in other companies. And in fact, they do it in companies that aren't even wrestling related. New broom comes in, they bring in their own people and that they want to work with, and now there's fewer spots, and we parted ways. That was it.
Now, they had an issue with something you said about fans in the last shoot interview that we ended up taking off. Do you recall what that was?
God, no.
Okay.
What would it be?
You asked me to take it down. It was you had talked about fans and how it was misunderstood. Something and how you didn't like fans.
Oh, it is misunderstood that I don't like fans, or that I don't, it's misconstrued. Much like my comments on Dave Meltzer, or my comments on smart, quote unquote, smart fans. How, everybody assumes that I don't like them, or I don't value them, nothing could be further from the truth. I do value fans, and I tell fans all the time, thank you. When they come up and go, I'm a fan, I'm like, thank you very much, because if you weren't, I wouldn't be able to do what I've been able to do. I don't have a problem with that. I don't even have a problem with newsletters. I don't have a problem with anybody stating their opinion. You are completely free. If you buy a ticket to watch a show, you're completely free to state your opinion. What I have a problem with is the assumption that because you have access to information, that you now have as much knowledge as the people who actually perform it. That nothing can be further from the truth. Nothing can be further from the truth. In order to have real knowledge on a topic, because we live in a day and age of access to information. So unfortunately, people get a small piece, or even not even sometimes a small piece, to just extrapolate the information from assumption. And then they walk around and they expound their opinions in public forums as if it's actual knowledge. That's fine if they want to do that. That doesn't bother me. What bothers me is that you and the performers and the wrestlers and the bookers and the writers and whatever you want to call it that live in this wrestling bubble allow the vocal minority to dictate to you what's right and what's wrong, what's good, what's bad, and you no longer market yourselves to the general audience. You now market yourself just to the vocal minority. And as long as you please them, as long as they write a good report about you, you're happy. The minute that they write a scathing report saying that you suck, you're terrible, you're bad, you're a mess, you don't know what to do. And there's nothing can be more ridiculous. That's like, I love medicine. That's my favorite hobby. I don't miss a single medical show. I watch House, I watch ER, I watch The Doctors, I watch Dr. Oz, I watch Dr. Kildare, I even watch back episodes on YouTube. I go on the internet and I go on the New England Journal of Medical Science, which is basically the equivalent of the Wrestling Observer of medicine. And I read it every day. And I go on websites that give me inside information on hospitals and doctors' lives. If I get sick, should I tell the doctor how to fix me? Why not?
Because you're not a doctor.
Oh, really? Guess what the fans aren't? They're not wrestlers. But you guys allow it. And you encourage it. And you change what you do and why you do it just to please that little group as opposed to trying to please. It's no different than we're going to have opinions, fan bases are going to have opinions on comic book movies. But if you were going to invest $200 million in Black Panther, would you be more concerned about selling more than $200 million of tickets, or would you be more concerned about just having a critical review?
I would want to make my money back.
Really, that's funny, because most people in wrestling would want to too, I would assume. But now these days, they're more concerned with the critical review. And that, you know, just like producing a comic book movie, you have a fan base that's vocal, of a minority that have read the comic books, know the characters, are already invested in them. Do you produce the movie just to appeal to them? Or do you produce a movie that appeals to them but also draws in an audience that's never once picked up a comic book?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, then why do you produce wrestling where it just appeals to wrestling fans and not to a general audience that like wrestling, but they're not invested in it? They don't watch it every week. They don't go on the internet and read reports or news sites about it. They just flip through the channels and see something that compels them to watch. Why do you produce the opposite? And that's my problem. It's not with Dave Meltzer or with Wade Keller or newsletters in general or with the fans or their interest. I think it's fantastic that they're so passionate and they care so much about what they love to watch. It's when those small groups of people, and I've been on shows where they try to hijack the show, or they end up hijacking the show, not even why they do it in the audience, but via their reports and their remarks and things like that. Always remember, and this is a true fact, familiarity breeds contempt. And the more that we allow the fans to become familiar with the product, the more contemptuous they become of it. To the point to where, how many people do you know that watch Raw every week, complain about it incessantly, and then watch it the very next week? And then complain about it incessantly, and then watch it the next week. You know? It's taken the fun out for them. Where if they were to go back and just be fans again, and not try to second guess or outthink because of their familiarity with the product, what's being done. And that I guess, and this will be the last thing I'll say about it, is the biggest thing is that as a fan, you have to understand, no one match lives on its own. They're not in a bubble. A lot of these matches that are under, Martin Scorsese just recently made a comment about Rotten Tomatoes, because the cinema has the same thing. You know, Rotten Tomatoes is making judgments for an audience before they even get to the theater to watch a film. And a lot of these the vocal minority of the wrestling fans are doing the very same thing, without taking into context that that wrestling match doesn't live in a bubble. That wrestling match, if it's done with the right idea, has some kind of forethought to it, and it's a singular chapter, or sometimes it's a singular paragraph in an overall story that you don't see the whole picture, but you're now judging it just on that one singular event, as opposed to it's now playing a part in a direction that's going to build to a much bigger and much more satisfying end. And that fans need to kind of keep that in mind, and the people that are performing it need to keep that in mind too, you know, and not live and die by just the critique.
Now, what led to your purchase of OVW, and what plans do you have for it for the future?
What led to my purchase of OVW was really timing. Danny Davis and I were discussing the future, and he was talking about how he was ready to retire. He had already bought a home in Clearwater, Florida, and one thing led to another, and we kind of came to the agreement that I would purchase it from him, and I'm excited. I really am. My plans for the future are to rebuild it. The bones are there, the structure's there. The television is still existing, it's still there. We're 25 episodes away from the 1000th episode of television continuously. So I think only Raw, as far as a wrestling program, has been on longer than OVW. And I want to build it back up, both the school, which I can do, and the actual promotion side of it to where it was when I was there the first time with WWE, prior to WWE severing their ties and moving everybody to Florida. That last year we ran 186 live events. I don't think very many people know that. 52 of those were television tapings. That means 134 of those were live events. And we did an average attendance of nearly 400 people at each event for 134 events. I think that's pretty respectful. And it's my hope and my goal to build it back up to where we're running on that kind of a basis again, and giving young wrestlers an opportunity to not just go out and have a match, but go out and truly work in a functioning, independently operated territory where they can get that type of experience working on TV, understanding how that TV presentation relates to how they can motivate and draw an audience at those live events, what they can and cannot do, and what works and doesn't work for them, to build that audience and make it bigger to where they can now make more money at those events, to where they can now capitalize on their efforts in the ring, to where they can now merchandise themselves and sell their merch at those shows and on TV, and those are opportunities for experiences that you just can't get pretty much anywhere these days. It would be probably one of the be the singular place that you could do that, you know, and get learn skills that would prepare you for when you do have an opportunity on a national and international level to take full advantage of those, and not just go be another cog in the wheel, but truly have an opportunity to be a star and draw some money.
How are you going to manage all that on your own, because you have all these schools all over the world?
I'm not doing it on my own. I'm going to have a staff of people. I've already got 2 guys that are there right now running TV for me this evening, since I can't be there, and I'm going to get trainers, experienced trainers. I treat the wrestling schools much like you would assume that you should be treated, like you would go to a university. You pay your tuition to go to a university, and let's say it's for accounting. You pay your tuition, and you're like, hey, that's, you know, I'm ready to go. Who's my professor? Oh, he's really good. Oh yeah, okay. Well, what's he done? Where's he been? What companies does he work for? Well, he's not really been anywhere. He was the top of his class, and he's just worked for us. And you know, he was so good that we've had him do some of the accounting for us here at the school, and we've had him start to teach everybody else. So wait a minute, you're telling me that he's not actually went anywhere? He's not had any real world experience? He's not actually been in an employment situation where he's made mistakes that he can then come back and tell me so that I can avoid those same pitfalls? What am I paying the tuition for to learn from him? And that's what happens with a lot of these wrestling schools, is that a wrestler will go through the school, and no matter what the length of time, he doesn't have a real quantifiable amount of experience, but now he's teaching other potential, future students how to be professional wrestlers. So he himself doesn't have an adequate grasp or understanding of what it is he's teaching. Now the guys he's teaching have even less, and it starts to get watered down further and further. So the biggest thing I want to try to get for the school is people who have a certain amount of experience to where they can communicate that and teach that to the students.
And will you have individual promoters you're working with in the various towns promoting your product for all those house shows you're talking about?
Some, that was a lot of the way that, territories used to operate was, you'd have X number of towns and you would promote those towns, they'd be yours, but because I had the TV and the roster and the talent, then I'd send you those, and we'd work out the deal financially to where you were compensated for the work that you did. And some of those towns I'll do that with, and then some of those towns I'll have a marketing agent that I'm going to employ to go out and do those towns on my own.
A fan wanted me to ask you about Christopher Nowinski, who you trained in Tough Enough and I guess in OVW as well.
Yeah, what about him?
What are your thoughts on him and what he's doing now with all the concussions?
Christopher Nowinski was a very talented young man. I remember having the conversation with Chris once Tough Enough was over about the fact that I was picking Maven to win. And because Maven, it was just the right thing at the right time for the right reason for Maven, and I told and explained to Chris that if he wanted a career, that just to stay with it, and he'd be at the right time, it would be perfect for him. And he did come back, and he had the potential to be a major star. It's just too bad that he had suffered a concussion, came back too soon, and then once he came back, suffered yet another concussion, and then that was when he had post-concussion syndrome. But it's funny how life works. I mean, it works in odd ways. I think he's much better off now and doing far greater work for everybody concerned, as opposed to just being a WWE superstar. And not just for wrestling, but the NFL and just head injuries in general. I mean, him being involved with that Sports Legacy Institute and the work that they're doing and trying to understand the human brain and the damage that takes place from concussions is amazing, and it is changing how people view those things. I remember when I first got my second concussion, I was knocked out, sick, and I was just told, hey, don't fall asleep, your brain will swell and you'll die. And I spent 3 days trying to stay awake. Didn't even go to the hospital. And I didn't go to the hospital for a lot of them. I ended up suffering, 2 strokes from them. And you just never thought about it. I mean, it was just one of those things. It's like, dust it off, get back up, you'll move on. And now we realize that it has much greater effects, much more long-reaching side effects than we could have ever imagined.
And you've been friends with Mick Foley for a long time. Could you talk about your friendship with him and the incident he discusses in his book, where I guess were exposed to?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, Mick and I have been friends, for a lot of years, and we just hit it off. I mean, it was just, I don't know why, we just connected. And we like, not bragging or putting it over, but like on screen, we have like a chemistry where we just work, like Martin and Lewis, or, any other comedy duo. It just clicks. And we don't have to try or anything. And we were in the car, we'd be traveling together, And we'd do the verbal sparring where it was like boxing, but we'd use put downs and jokes on each other, and we would equate them to, stinging them with a right or a left or an uppercut, or you got a standing 8 out of that, or have him up against the ropes, or a knockout. I got to be honest, I knocked Mick out a lot. But then Mick took it outside of the car, took it into the locker room, and then got an audience, and then took it on the internet when the internet was just starting to come around, and then took it onto TV, and then took it into his books, and then just kept going with it to the point where now he's like literally obsessed, where it seems like anybody that would be that preoccupied with another person might have some kind of sexual attraction or something. It's kind of weird, a little freaky. But the story about the penis suplex in Montreal is because it was started with me and Bob Holly. I would work with Bob Holly quite a lot, and Bob was always so serious. So Bob would pick me up and he'd do a stalling suplex, and he'd hold me there forever. I mean, just every night, and I knew he was ribbing me because he'd just continue to hold me there. So I started pointing at his crotch and making like it was, he had a small dick, or I'd act like I was whacking him off. He never knew. And then he'd always wonder why people were laughing when he'd hold me up there, and he'd be turning around in a circle, and I'd just be pointing at him. Because I got tired, I got bored, just hanging out up there. So, and I loved ribbing him because he was a great straight man. So then Mick stooged me off one night in Montreal, and knew that I didn't wear underwear or undertights on a singlet that I had, because you could see him underneath it. So I always wouldn't wear them under it. And so he told Bob, and I knew something was up. And it was a 4 corners match. It was Bob and Crash and the Dudleys and myself and Mick, and I can't remember who the 4th team was. And I did everything I could to avoid getting in the ring with Bob. And then somehow I got in the ring with Bob, and like Bob grabbed me and went to suplex me. And I thought, oh no you don't. And I went to kind of just dead ass on him, just dropped my hips. And he's so strong, he just took me right on up, and then he just went and uncovered the Big Jim and the Twins, and they were hanging out for everybody in Montreal to see in the ice arena there in the middle of December, which of course all my junk shrunk right up, and but to be fair, like, it ain't the first time that the Dick Mango Trio have made a public appearance. People have seen my junk all over the world. I do not know why I have a problem with that, but I was on the beach with Bushwhacker Luke and Butch and Marty Jannetty. Some lady comes up with her kids. Hey, can I take a picture? Scoot back. They drop right out in the shorts there. I'm in a battle royal. One of the guys come up and yank my tights all the way down to my ankles. Louisville, Kentucky, Triple H suplexes me. Out they go, So, yeah, it's been a problem as far as my junk making appearances literally around the world.
Now, Foley hasn't appeared on this channel yet, so is there any jab you want to give him to close off the topic of him today?
No. I can think of a lot, but yeah, I mean, come on, look at him. There's just a wealth of material right there. But we'll let it slide.
Can you tell us the story of why Walmart pulled your WWE action figure?
Walmart pulled my WWE action figure, and actually I'm still number 5 on the list of things. There's 22 things that Walmart refuses to sell because they feel it's an endangerment to society. I got beat out by Pregnant Barbie. She's number 1. But my action figure is number 5. Now you can still buy an AR-15, live ammo, and a hunting knife at Walmart, but you can't buy Pregnant Barbie or my action figure. And the reason that happened was because 2 women, one of them was an assistant professor of all things of communications at a college in Georgia. And she had taken her kids to Walmart, and walked in, saw a picture on the packaging of me holding the head and with a real crazy look on my face. Did no homework, did no research, didn't know, didn't decide to actually watch the show. Nothing. Why do that? Because that goes back to our access of information and then expounding our opinion in a public forum. Let's just write a letter to the Atlanta Constitution complaining that, and I quote, my action figure was a training manual for future spousal abusers because I was running around with a decapitated woman's head. Now, this wasn't the first time this happened, because in ECW, we had ran a college and a women's group had protested the show because they had a picture of me holding the head like this, and it looked like I was choking a woman, which nothing could be further from the truth, because if you paid attention and you actually listened, I never referred to the head as male or female. I always referred to it as asexual, and I referred to it as them or they, never he or she, and I never interacted with it as if it was a she. But let's not bother with that. Let's just go ahead and write a letter to the Atlanta Constitution. And the Atlanta Constitution, of course, printed it because at that time wrestling was very, very popular throughout mainstream culture. And then immediately Walmart panicked, pulled the action figures from the shelf, which resulted in a week and a half of it being a national news event. Time magazine wrote an article about it. It was on, Jay Leno had it in his monologue, Dave Letterman talked about it, Rush Limbaugh. It was ridiculous. And they sold all the action figures, and to this day, if they make another action figure, they will not put the little popped off Barbie doll head in there for fear that somebody will get upset.
Do you have any stories about traveling with Marty Jannetty when you were the New Rockers with him? Because he's known for both his demons and his ribs.
As far as traveling with Marty Jannetty, I've got tons of stories. Some of them I really can't discuss here. And as far as traveling with him, as far as his ribs, Marty was like traveling with Indiana Jones in the Temple of Doom. I don't know how his brain works, but like, if you leave him alone for 30 seconds, he starts looking around the room and thinking of shit to do, to mess with you. For example, one time, like if we went to an area and we were going to stay in a particular town for a hotel for 3 or 4 days, he didn't like to eat out. He would go, to save money, he'd go to the grocery store. So he'd buy groceries and then leave them set in the room on the air conditioner or whatever to keep them cool. I think Glenn Jacobs had slept in our room the night before, and then so we had a rollaway in the room, and I was taking a shower, which is never good because you're leaving him alone in the room. And I hear him out there doing something, and I know he's up to something. And he had taken the rollaway, had made it like an accordion and stuck it between the bathroom door that opened in and the closet wall, because there wasn't much space, it was real narrow, and then sat the jug of milk on the mattress so that when I opened the door, the mattress went like this and shot the jug of milk across the bathroom and crashed against the wall, and milk went everywhere. And it's just like, who thinks of that? How does your brain work like that? Went to go take a shower one time, and the water was all greasy because he had went and taken a shower before and taken the shower head off and stuffed it full of KY jelly. Where did you get the KY jelly? Why are you bringing it with you? And you took the time to take a shower head off. How'd you get it off? 8 IcoPro amino tablets that had been left in his garage for years and had like kind of brown edge on them. It gave him horrific gas, and the only reason he ate them was because it gave him horrific gas, so he would fart on the plane and bother people. I remember we were at San Antonio in Texas, and they had this little closet of a room where they were having the agent meeting, and he's like, watch this. I go, okay. And he gets a big smile on his face, and he walks in the agent room, and then nothing. And all of a sudden the door opens, and he walks out laughing, shuts the door. He says, stand right here. I don't move. About 30 seconds later, Jesus Christ, and they all come piling out of there because he'd went in and busted ass, didn't tell anybody, and then shut the door again and left him sealed in that little small coffin of a room with him shitting his pants. Who does that? all the time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Why do you think he was hired and refired so many times? Because he must hold the record for the amount of times.
I think he actually does. I think he beat Iron Sheik. Because Vince will always bring you back if he thinks he can make money with you. And Marty Jannetty is probably the most underrated performer in the history of wrestling. Because everybody goes, oh, you don't want to be the Marty Jannetty of the team. Why not? He's an incredibly talented guy. He was the foundation for he and Shawn together. Shawn, more charismatic, much better politician backstage. And Marty, of course, had his own personal issues and demons. But Marty was an incredibly talented guy. Really, really talented guy. And I don't think he gets near the credit that he deserves for his ability in the ring or the matches that he's had. So, you know, when people say, hey, you know, oh, he's the Marty Jannetty of the team, you might want to take that as a compliment and not as the slight that everybody intends it to be.
Now, speaking of Shawn Michaels, you had a weird match when you were Shinobi for, I guess, one show against Shawn Michaels. What was the whole idea behind that?
It was during a time where I had come in as Avatar, and I had, you know, it was a different kind of character, different approach, and it was a character. It wasn't a gimmick. Gimmick is an extension of who you are. It is your own personality turned way up. That's why they work. Gimmicks work. Characters don't. They give you a character, then you have to portray a character. And wrestlers are not actors; they're reactors. And it's also a matter of it communicating energy-wise to a live audience and an audience on TV. And the reason that Steve Austin works is because he's Steve Austin. And the reason Undertaker works is because he's Undertaker. The reason Ultimate Warrior works is because he's the Ultimate Warrior. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. They don't walk around, you know, Ultimate Warrior don't run through the airport and screaming and shaking stuff, but he's the Ultimate Warrior. I can't make that clear enough. When you give somebody a character, it's a character, and most of the time they don't work. They just won't happen. But a large part of that too was that knowing what I know now, if I'd have known it then, I would have worked the matches completely different. I would have done the gimmick a completely different way, and probably could have made it at least a little bit more successful than what it was. So the match with Shawn was a match that I think Cornette had went to them and said, hey, this is a gimmick, this is a character, a gimmick that he's created. Why don't you let him go out there and wrestle as that? And I think Shawn basically volunteered and said, yeah, I'll go wrestle him so you can see what he can do. And then because I was more in my element and more comfortable doing the thing that, you know, worked for me, that allowed them to see what real potential I had.
What is your martial arts background?
I've been trained in Kempo karate and jiu-jitsu and also long style karate. But I've got like black belt and brown and a green. I bought them all at JCPenney's. They made nothing. So.
And how was Shawn Michaels to deal with in those days? Was he all right with you?
Shawn was all right. You know, it just, I don't know. It was a weird time, and it was a weird situation. You know, I was brought in and taught that the reason we all shake each other's hands was because we all need each other. You can't be the main event without the opening match, and you can't be the opening match without the main event. And you certainly can't win if somebody's not willing to lose. Nobody really wins. The only thing that's fake about professional wrestling, no ifs, ands, or buts about it, I don't give two shits what people say. The only thing is that it's predetermined. That's it. Everything that we do in the ring is quite real. All the bumps you take are quite real. If you do the moves, the real ones, real wrestling moves, an armbar is quite real, headlock is quite real, chokehold is quite real, wrist lock is quite real, toe hold, quite real, all of them, quite real. Some of the video game-esque type of moves that are now pretty prolific in wrestling. Yeah, they're not real, but the bump is. The moves off the top rope, those are real because the bump still is. It's the intent behind what you're doing. That's what's fake. That hasn't changed. And a lot of guys, I'm not singling out Sean, but there were a lot of guys at that time, and it seemed like it was being fostered. It was being, encouraged. That a lot of guys had this attitude of, oh, well, I'm the main event, this guy's a curtain jerker. You can't be the main event, you don't have an opening match. And there should be that type, there should be the competitiveness to want to be the star, to be the thing that drives the show. But you should also have an understanding that you're not bigger than the show. That it takes all of these other people to build up the house, to build up the card, to produce the show, to do the lights, to do the sound. You just walk out there as just you by yourself. Ain't nobody gonna pay to see that. I don't care who you are. Hulk Hogan never acted that way. Is Hulk Hogan a driven, self-centered performer? Yeah, we all are. But he would always go out of his way to thank people, to, appreciate what they do. Vince McMahon himself will come up and tell you thank you. Because if he doesn't have you, he doesn't have a show. So there's nobody bigger than the show. And there were a lot of guys at that time that felt and behaved like they were.
Now, you've been around Jim Cornette for a lot of years, and you live in the same town.
I love Jimmy.
Yeah. Could you give me your opinion on him?
I love Jim Cornette. Jim Cornette is one of the few guys that I know that has went to bat for me on several occasions, and I owe Jimmy the world. Jimmy's just a really passionate individual when it comes to wrestling, but really, he's a very passionate and a very opinionated, and he's a very honest. He's very direct. So, if you ask him something, he's going to give you his honest and direct opinion. He's not going to sugarcoat it. He's not going to lie. And if you don't like it, you don't like it. I know we all love to say, oh, I want people to be honest. Well, go talk to Jim. He's honest. I don't like Jim. Why? Because he says things that I don't like. But you want him to be honest. But, no buts. He'll give you his honest opinion. Now, the problem with Jimmy is there's no regulator. It's 0 to 100. And sometimes Jimmy, and God love him, he can't come in and tell you that there's just dirty shoes on the carpet, because he'll come in and tell you it like the house is on fire. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So
there's no in between. There's no, it's all or nothing with him, and he's very passionate, which is great. I mean, it's but where he stands. You don't have to question. You don't have to wonder. All you need to do is go ask him. He'll tell you. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. He's not gonna leave you guessing, or does he really mean what he says? Well, he'll make sure you know.
Any chance that we're going to see him pop up in your version of OVW since he's in?
I'd love for Jimmy to come around, but I don't think so. Only because I think for Jimmy he'd be happier not. You know what I mean? I think Jimmy's one of the guys that he's so passionate and so driven that it has to be Jimmy's vision, and it has to be and it would be hard for him to kind of take a back seat and kind of just go along for the ride, or co-pilot. He needs to be the guy behind the wheel. He needs to be the guy driving the bus, And I get that, I understand, but it'd be great, to be able to access. And I'm sure if I were to call him, he'd give me advice and give me his opinion, and at any time. But I think for Jimmy, he's happier where he's at. And I don't think coming and getting involved, not even with just OVW, but just wrestling in general, on any full-time basis or even a part-time basis, I don't think it would do well for him.
Now, speaking of Jimmy's vision, you were very involved with Smoky Mountain Wrestling and well remembered from that territory. What are your memories from working at SMW?
You know, I was very fortunate to get to work in Smoky Mountain Wrestling and to be programmed in an angle with Rock and Roll Express. You know, I tell people all the time, all the wrestlers all the time, the most important thing that you have to develop is a personality. You have to develop a persona that allows people to describe you in a sentence or less. I don't care how good you are in the ring. If they can't turn to their friends and family and go, this guy is A, B, C, D, E, they're not going to pay to see you. Simple as that. And I knew Jimmy for years, and Jimmy had seen me wrestle in multiple independent shows, on WCW shows. Never had an interest in bringing me into Smoky Mountain. And then when I had trained Dan Severin, went out and made a smart-ass comment on an interview that the ringside interviewer was trying to get Dan to do, and I took the mic and made a smart-ass comment. That showed him I had a personality. It showed him that and inspired him and gave me the opportunity then to go to Smoky Mountain, because Eddie Gilbert had just left and teamed with Unabomb, which was Kane, and get those chances to work with Ricky and Robert, and then under Jimmy's guidance, and if I knew then what I know now, I could have capitalized on that opportunity much more than what I did, and I could have utilized it to truly get real ticket selling heat. I utilized it to show that I was a great wrestler. I didn't utilize it to show that I was a great worker, and I lost sight of that and tried to have just good matches, and as opposed to matches that would have built more of an audience in the territory. And going back, if I had the chance to go back, I'd do it a completely different way.
You were involved in a few vignettes and segments with The Rock. I'm not sure if you ever actually wrestled him or not. But
I wrestled him numerous times.
Okay, what are your thoughts on him and his accomplishments, and how was it to work with him?
I worked with The Rock when they first brought him in as Rocky Johnson. We worked a lot. We were paired together, and I was there to kind of help bring him along. And then they hid him away in the Nation of Domination, and then he basically was given that opportunity to find his voice, to find himself, and it worked. And it just took off from there. And then we had that little bit of that angle where we not only did the vignettes backstage where I was jealous of Mick and his relationship with The Rock, but we had matches that we worked on TV, and I think maybe a pay-per-view or something. I don't remember. But Dwayne Johnson is an awesome individual, and one, because he invests time, money, and effort in himself and works really hard. He's not just given anything. Two, he is what I talked about earlier. He's one of those guys that appreciates and thanks everybody, because he understands that he's not bigger than the show, that it takes more than just him to make him a star. Never once did I ever get the impression from him or have him treat me, or did I ever see him treat anyone in any untoward manner or disrespectful fashion, or as if they were less than him. And from what I've heard, he still does that to this very day. He's a genuinely good person, and I couldn't be happier for him for all the success he's had.
Would you say he's the most successful wrestler of all time as far as becoming a celebrity and making all this money?
I'd say The Rock is unquestionably the most successful crossover celebrity out of wrestling that there ever has been. Yeah. Hulk Hogan would be a second, and then probably then after that Steve Austin, and and there are going to be people who are going to do, oh no, so and so. Look, that guy is making at least $20 million a film. How many movies has he put out just this year?
Oh,
and how many years has he been putting movies out? He's getting paid. He's been getting paid. He has his own production company. He produces his own projects. So I'd say he's pretty successful, and he's a worldwide brand. There's no place in this world people do not know his name.
And he's probably the only wrestler around that could sell out arenas these days.
Still to this day. It's no accident that at the WrestleMania in New York, they brought The Rock back to face John Cena. Why? You're going to go through the time and expense to bring back The Rock when you have a whole roster of people that you could have chosen? Because you knew that if you put him in that match against John Cena, what was going to happen?
It's going to sell tickets and pay-per-view buys.
That's right. That's right.
And what do you think about Hulk Hogan? You just brought him up, him being taken out of the Hall of Fame and everything that's going on with him.
You know, I think it's sad. I think it's disappointing that, you know, they've pretty much erased him from WWE history, and all of his work and all of his accomplishments, and you know, I think that's just, I don't know, it's disappointing. You know, I'm not condoning what he said. I got to make that clear. Jesus, because everybody will take it the wrong way and get offended. I certainly am not condoning what he said. But people do make mistakes. People do say stupid things. There's not a person watching this or ain't watching this that haven't ever done or said something stupid that could possibly be offensive to a large group of people somewhere at some point at some time. And should they be now chastised and treated the way that Hulk has been? You know, I think it's, you know, they could have done something. He could have issued an apology, and then let it be. It's almost, you know, I don't know. It would seem like a very extreme knee-jerk reaction that WWE had done. You know, that where they just jumped on it and were like, "Whoa, we got to take this action," and they just took it to the absolute 10th level.
You knew him in TNA, I guess, for his time there.
Mm-hmm.
What was he like to deal with there?
Hulk Hogan in TNA was great. Hulk Hogan, you know, I never heard him complain. No matter how much pain, he was in a lot of pain. He had to have a lot of surgeries and a lot of work done on his knees and his back and his hip. He'd always show up early when he was asked. He would do media. I watched him when we were in England, you know, doing a meet and greet. He would interact with every single person that was in that line. And when, you know, they were like going to cut the line off, he told them no. And he sat there and he made sure that every single person that was in line, he had given them time and effort and gave them a moment. Because that's what the fans want. They don't want just an autograph. I mean, that's pointless. They want a moment. They want an opportunity to share something, a special moment with the celebrity or the fan or the wrestler, I mean, that they're coming to see, and he took the time with each and every one of those fans to do exactly that.
And you mentioned Steve Austin. I know you're friends with him, but where do you think his place in history is in wrestling? And I think you wrestled him too, didn't you?
Well, I've wrestled Steve and worked with him at the school I had in Lima, Ohio, and he's an awesome individual. I can't say enough good things about Steve. And you know, as far as his place in history, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. I mean, he's right up there. There's not many that could be much bigger than Steve Austin. He really completely, single-handedly revitalized wrestling in the late 90s and early 2000s. If it had not been for Steve and Vince McMahon, we would not have enjoyed the boom that we had at that time, you know? And that was, again, he was the catalyst that created that crossover and made it such a mainstream phenomenon.
And you won the European title from Perry Saturn. What are your thoughts on him as a wrestler and all the recent personal issues he's had?
Well, Perry was always a very talented guy, and he was, you know, he was a great wrestler. And the stuff that's going on with him now, I just think it's sad. It's heartbreaking. You know, when people that watch it and they make comments or they make remarks, just remember, we all, well, not you, not Canadians, because you guys have healthcare up there, but in the United States, every one of us are a hospital bill away from being in the exact same situation that Perry Saturn's in right now. And you know, whenever we drive by and we see homeless people or we see somebody in Perry's situation, and just, but for the grace of God, there go I, because at any moment, at any time, your circumstances could change like that, and you could be in the exact same situation as Perry. And I just think it's a tragedy.
Superstar Billy Graham's another guy that he has a GoFundMe going because he's in a lot of physical pain and he needs an operation. What's your opinion on his place in wrestling history?
Superstar Billy Graham was an inspiration, you know, and was almost like I would liken Superstar Billy Graham to being like the Gorgeous George was of the 50s. Billy Graham was that of the 70s. You know, he was a guy that literally, you know, drove a lot of other young wannabe wrestlers into emulating him. I remember even when I first started wrestling, I had the tie-dyed tights, and you know, thought of myself, you know, because he was over. I mean, he was really over. Because he could cut promos. He looked like $1 million. I mean, he was amazing, and you know, he had an awesome run in WWF at that time as a world champion. He and Bruno drew big houses, drew a lot of money. I think the rumor has it that even when Vince Sr. was wanting him to drop the belt to Backlund, you know, Bruno didn't want him to do it and wanted to keep working with him and wanted to have Billy, you know, go into business for himself and, you know, keep it running and keep it going, the run that he and Bruno had, because they were just drawing so much money. But Vince Sr. was very much a man that he gave you a date, and he gave his word, and then he stuck to it.
And you had some great matches with Steve Regal. Any memories of those and his position now with WWE?
Steve Regal is an amazing worker. In every sense of the word, has so much experience and such an understanding of what needs to be done in the ring and when to do it and why to do it. And you know, it was a day off every time I got the opportunity to work with Steve Regal, because all I had to do was, you know, it allowed me to sell and truly sell, not just lay there and act like I was hurt, but to sell and sell the finish and sell working with him. I got one opportunity one time to work with Finley, and it was much the same way. Both guys very aggressive, coming at you as if it were a real competitive situation, and it makes it so easy for you to do what you need to do.
Now, Wes Briscoe was a gut check winner when you were in TNA, and he works for us now quite regularly, Grey North Wrestling, so I was wondering your opinion on him.
I think Wes Briscoe is a great kid. I really like Wes. I think he's got a lot of heart. I think he's got a lot of talent. I think that, you know, I've seen in my experience, and a little bit with Wes, to their detriment, and I think they get the guys like Wes, Garrett Bischoff, David Flair is another situation, Eric Watts, another situation, where they have a famous father, and then they kind of get put in places before they're ready, before they've developed, before they've gotten the experience, before they've garnered the understanding. They're now put in spots long before they should be. And you know, the people that are doing it, the dads, are well-meaning, you know what I mean? The only one of those guys I've ever seen that really was able to pick that ball up right then and there and run with it with that little amount of experience was Dustin Rhodes. Every other one, that's just been too much too soon to be put in that spot with too many expectations for them to be able to draw at a certain level that they just themselves couldn't fulfill. There's just no way. Which then that pressure of being the son of somebody, you know, like Wes's, Gerald Briscoe's son, Jack Briscoe's nephew, you know, it cracks him, it pushes him, and it's a shame. Very talented kid, had a lot of potential, but was just put a little too far, a little too soon, to where, you know, he wasn't ready to carry that ball. And the further you put him up the card, the more the expectations, the more the pressure, and if they don't have that polish, that experience, and that understanding, they can't carry it off.
Now, Alex Silva was another gut check winner. I guess he's in jail right now for
Is he?
something drug related. Yeah, because we did an interview with him shortly before he was going away.
Yeah,
I wasn't sure if it was going to be up to 3 years, so I'm not sure exactly how long he's going to be away for. But he admitted to us that he had some issues in TNA as far as getting to the airports on time and so forth. What were your thoughts on the opportunity he had and what happened with it?
Well, he had a great opportunity, but Alex was too immature. It was not ready. It was not the right thing at the right time for Alex, because he had a lot of talent, had a great look, had a great build, had a lot of charisma, had a lot of passion, had all the tools, but he had no maturity and he had no experience. And his head went so far up his ass that he needed a plastic stomach so he could see out of it, so he could see where he was going. And that was the problem. And Alex basically took a blessing and made it into a curse because of his immaturity and his stupidity. And I've told him that to his face. It's not like I'm saying this, and I'm not saying it as a put down. I'm saying it as a statement of fact. I'm not disparaging him. It's just the truth. He got completely lucky on that gut check and Flair saying yes, recanting his no and saying yes, because he cut such an impassioned promo and had such an opportunity, and he pissed it away because of his own personal issues and his own personal demons and his immaturity. Like I said, if he'd have grown up and been able to see the forest for the trees and actually understood what he had, who knows what he could have done.
Bruce Pritchard was a producer in TNA around the same time you were in talent relations there. Now Bruce is really popular again with his podcast and everything, so I'm just wondering what it was like working with him behind the scenes.
You know, Bruce he was in Vince's inner circle for years. And before that, he had been working with Paul Bosch in Houston. So he's got so much experience. And, you know, Bruce wasn't just a producer. Bruce was the actual vice president of talent relations and television. And, you know, Bruce brought all of that experience and all of that understanding and all of that he had learned with Vince and with Pat Patterson and all of those people. And it was a great opportunity for me to watch and learn a lot of those things that he did at the same time. So,
is he as funny off camera as he is on?
Oh yeah, Bruce is pretty funny. He and Simon Diamond, Pat Kinney, we'd all travel together, and he would purposely just do things or say things to get Pat wound up, and then they'd sit there and argue back and forth, and you know, we just basically put on a show. It was hilarious at first, until after about 3 days you wanted to shove them both out of the car while the car was still moving.
What are your thoughts on Dixie Carter, and what do you think her biggest mistake was when she was running TNA?
Dixie Carter is a wonderful lady, very charming. She's very sweet, but she's not a wrestling promoter. You know, it's not a passion for her, and as a result, that was one of the mistakes that she made, was that it was not a passion for her, and it was more of a vanity project, in my opinion. And the other problem was, and this goes back to for any business, you know, it wasn't her money at first. A large part of the time, it was her parents' money, and the company's, you know, Panda Energies. So if it had been her money, there's a difference when it's your money, that you don't go and rent a palatial office building at first, and you go and you get the cheapest office space you can get. That's nice, gives a good presentation, creates a nice image, but isn't really a, you know, isn't top of the line because you just can't afford it. You haven't got the money coming in, and as the money comes in, you now expand and you grow and you move into the high-end office space. You don't buy a $2,000 desk. You go to secondhand store and you buy a $100 desk. You get a chair on sale. Now when you're making money, now you get the big executive desk and the executive furniture in the office, and you decorate it, and you don't do all of those things until your company is making money. And that wasn't the case. And that, that was a big mistake. The other biggest mistake is that she surrounded herself with sycophants and people that, wanted to simply justify their job as opposed to actually trying to do it and build a company for her. They would all go out of their way to, they'd literally trip over a quarter, they'd trip over $1 to save a quarter. They would go out of their way to try to do the least amount of marketing, promotion, and advertising, but expect the most maximum return on a live event. She just can't do. They would rely heavily on social media for promotion. Social media is great. It's an awesome tool, but it is simply an assistance that you use in addition to television and radio. Because at the end of the day, there is a much bigger and much broader audience that listens to the radio in their car, and there are a much bigger and much broader audience that watch TV than ever there is on the internet. Don't believe me? Then answer me this question. Why do internet service providers advertise their services on the radio and television? Because they're trying to reach an audience that they can't reach on the internet.
Now, Billy Corgan tried to buy TNA at one point, and he had some position there, and it was very brief. What were your thoughts on that situation? And now he's going on, so I guess he has control over the NWA title, and he's trying to build that back up.
Yeah, that was a really interesting situation. TNA was practically like a vampire. Like, you'd think it was dead, and then all of a sudden it came back to life, and then it would be right there again, and it was 1 foot in the grave, and then it come back to life. A situation where people step forward, much like Billy Corgan. Aerolux had stepped forward to finance the TV in exchange for a portion of ownership in the company. Billy's a very passionate, fan. He wants to be involved in wrestling because he loves it. And it didn't work out for him, obviously. When Anthem came in and they, purchased the controlling interest and basically, I think, paid Billy off. They paid Aerolux off and paid off all the debts that TNA had incurred, to where they could take it over 100%. And that might have been for the best for Billy. You know what I mean? It's going to be a major project, and I hope that TNA doesn't just survive; it goes on to thrive and continue to grow, and becomes a real substantial promotion, because the wrestling business needs it desperately. But as far as his acquisition of the NWA and control of the title, I think I've seen a lot of the stuff they're doing, and I think it's really good, and I think it's necessary. I just wish that they could reach a broader, more general audience with it, because the project itself is terrific, and they're taking the right steps to make that title seem like it's a noteworthy and significant title again. It's just going to take it's going to take time.
Our videos are getting more views than their title match videos, so.
Yeah, and that, and this is nothing against Nick Aldis, but, and this is something I've never understood with the NWA, back before Billy had it. They would put the NWA title on, and don't get me wrong, again, not disparaging anybody, put it on Tim Storm, they put it on Adam Pearce. If I'm the general fan, I don't know who those guys are. If I see NWA champion on a poster and I see so-and-so, I'm not compelled to buy a ticket. If I see NWA world heavyweight champion Billy Gunn, I know who Billy Gunn is. And I'm more compelled to buy a ticket because that name has a brand awareness to it. The NWA, unfortunately, in and of itself, it's going to take a while to build up that brand awareness of it again, and back to where it may, now be in and of itself a draw, a thing that compels somebody to want to potentially buy a ticket when they go, oh, he's NWA world champion. Oh, I want to go see that. Because there's, since WCW stopped using or affiliating with NWA, I forget what year that was, back in, that was back in
91 or 92.
Was it 91 or 92? I thought it might have been in the late 80s.
Because they still kept a version of it in Japan, I think.
That doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Okay, they had it kept in Japan. I'm talking about the general audience.
Yeah.
And having access to and being shown, hey, this is the NWA, this title means something.
It was around the time Turner took over.
Yeah. And they dubbed Crockett, there was a stink about a title change, and the association, the promoters didn't want that done, and Crockett was like, well, screw it, then we'll just use WCW belt. And that's what they did. And then, so now how many generations, 3, 4 generations of an audience that have not been taught or made aware of how significant the NWA title is? It's just going to take a lot of time, and it's going to take, more exposure of that title to build it back up again.
How do you think the new owners of Impact are doing now with the cutbacks and trying to keep a more reasonable budget, it seems?
Well, I think that's what they've always needed to do. Even back in the, prior days, they needed to cut back and make more, number one rule in wrestling, besides if it sells tickets, do it. Number 2 rule is you got to take shit and make shoe polish. And that's basically, they're in a tough spot. They absolved a lot of debt, and that raises their back end. It raises the nut that they've got to crack to get their money that they've already invested back out before they can ever claim that they're actually making a profit. And so they're doing the best thing they can do, which is, limit expenses as much as they can, and then they're going to have to be as creative as possible as far as its presentation to make the talent look as much like stars as possible, so that they can be attractions and can possibly draw money to now start to backfill that debt. I have to do the same thing in OVW. I'm going to have to try to, make the talent. I've got to update the presentation and the appearance. The show looks good, but I have to update it more so that it looks more like not just a show, but an event in and of itself, so that now the wrestlers look more like stars. I give them a platform as much as possible to make them an attraction. And but I can't go out there and just have an unlimited amount of money and spend it like WWE does. I've got to do it as best I can, as effectively and as efficiently as I can, without breaking the bank and putting myself into where I've got such a high overhead that I'm never going to be able to turn a profit. And I think TNA's in the exact same situation.
What's your opinion on this one night only show that Cody Rhodes is involved with?
I wish Cody Rhodes and everybody that's involved in it nothing but the best of luck. I hope to God it's successful. Not just for Cody, because I love Cody. He's one of my kids. But because, the wrestling business needs it. If they can pull this off, and it will help to reinvigorate the business in a lot of different ways, and help to reinvigorate it on a level of where TNA might have a little more interest and a little more appeal. OVW would have a more interest because it might create an audience that goes, hey, you know what? It's not just WWE. Hey, I'm going to try and see where some of these other wrestlers wrestle and, see what they do. And Cody's smart. It's not a matter, in my opinion, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when Cody goes back to WWE. If this, win, lose, or draw with this, Cody now has more value and has a better spot to renegotiate, so he can go in there in a better position to make more money and be in a better position on the card, and because he's making his name in especially in the wrestling community, have value, and it's not just sitting back and trying to live off of just what he did with WWE. He's creating his own, which is admirable.
And what do you think about the whole Enzo Amore situation that was much talked about recently?
I just think it's, look, from what I understand, maybe I'm wrong, but I think he was cleared of all charges or something.
I'm not sure there was actually anything more than a Twitter accusation. I'm not sure if there was ever actual form.
See, I don't know.
Yeah.
If that's the case, that's even worse. Sexual assault is a terrible, terrible thing, because it's one thing to be a thief and to steal property or to destroy personal property. You can always go out and buy something else. But if it's sexual assault, you're stealing something that those people can never get back. You've taken something away from them, and it's a terrible deed. What's worse, though, is to falsely accuse, to cry wolf, and now literally destroy someone's life that's not ever done anything, and that makes it harder. What's even worse about it is not just the damage it's done to the individual that was falsely accused. It makes it harder for someone, male or female, who is sexually assaulted to come forward, and now for people to immediately believe them because someone else has used that as a weapon or a tool to burn somebody else's life to the ground. And that's the real tragedy of the whole situation, And I feel for Enzo. I think it's a terrible, terrible place that he's been put in. I don't know. Again, I heard that he was exonerated of all accusations, and if there was, I think there was an actual investigation at one point, police investigation, and they determined. And if that's the case, if they have determined that, and he is exonerated, then she should face some kind of punishment from the law. And I mean an extreme kind of punishment, because that's unforgivable. Now this man's career, his life is destroyed. WWE again jumped and they immediately cut him loose. That's their decision. I'm not judging that. But now he's tried in a court of public opinion. No matter what he does, as far as the public's concerned, there are going to be those that are always going to label him as some kind of sexual predator. Where if he's never done it, was never involved in that, how fair is that? How just is that? And then, she should, if that's the case, she should face some kind of punishment. If he had done it, then yeah, they should absolutely do everything that they've done to him and more, because it's a completely unforgivable crime. But what's even worse is if he hasn't. And from what I understand, he didn't. That they did a thorough investigation and found out that she was completely falsely accusing him.
Now, I believe you had some hand in CM Punk's OVW training practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for quite some time.
What are your thoughts on his jump over to UFC? And I guess he has a much better chance at his next fight because it's another guy that's 0-1.
I don't know if he has a much better chance, but I think it's great. I always told everyone that I've trained, get out of the wrestling business on your terms. And there's nothing wrong with what he's done. He wanted to go and do it. He pursued it. He has a name that's marketable thanks to WWE, which is allowing him to get this opportunity to do it on the level that he's doing it with the minimal amount of experience that he's doing it with. But my dad always taught me that if you sit and watch a fox chasing a rabbit, rabbit's usually going to outrun the fox. Why? The rabbit's run for his life. The fox run for his dinner. You want to figure out who's going to win in a fight? Watch the two men, see which one's fighting for his life and which one's fighting for his dinner. When that guy that Punk faced the first time came in, he was fighting for his life. It wasn't an opportunity for him. For him, if he had lost Punk, his whole career was done. And all he does is MMA. At some point in time, if Punk wanted to, thanks to the fact that he's still involved in MMA and he's keeping his name and his brand out there, he can always go back to WWE. That guy could never go anywhere. Not to mention, you imagine what the rest of the MMA world are going to be saying about him if Punk were to have beat him. This second guy, he's facing the exact same thing. And Punk better be ready and better be fighting for his life, because the other guy, I guarantee you, is. He ain't going to be fighting for his dinner. He ain't fighting for a payday. He ain't fighting just because, hey, I wanted to be a UFC fighter. He's fighting because he's fighting for his career. That was what made Royce Gracie back in the original UFC so hard to beat, is because you're taking on Royce Gracie. Well, Royce Gracie is taking on his entire family and carrying on the tradition and their name. And the brothers set that whole tournament up to put over Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. So if he loses, he's not losing. His whole family's losing. Their whole livelihood, everything is taking a step down. So how hard is that going to be able to beat that guy?
Now, for Roman Reigns, he's always a subject amongst the fans, as you were talking about earlier. Do you think he's doing all right, or do you think there should be a change in his character, turning him heel or something?
I think Roman's doing great. I think I think Roman really found his voice, and earlier or late last year, like in the fall or something, with him and Cena when they were going back and forth, and all of a sudden everybody loved him. And that's all it's taking, is that he's just got to find the right thing. The vocal minority are turning on him, much like they did Cena, much like they did The Rock, because they don't feel like they can be pandered to, and WWE can just push somebody down their throats. So they rebel, and they go, well, we're not just going to buy it. We're not just fans. We know what you're doing, and so therefore we're not going to like him, even though really they kind of want to. And given the right amount of time and the right circumstance, he'll find his persona, his voice, and when he does, they'll all be on board. Because how many of them all love Cena now?
A lot.
Exactly. And how many of them hated him before? And The Rock, when they used to chant, Rocky sucks, and then all of a sudden he's the greatest thing since sliced bread. Roman Reigns will be the exact same thing.
What do you think of Brock Lesnar's latest contract? I'm sure you've heard the details. He's doing quite well.
I haven't heard his details.
Apparently it's going to be like over $600,000 a match and $120,000 for an appearance, I guess.
Oh, good for him. Good for him. I think he deserves it. He's a draw. People will tune in and watch him.
Apparently he's going to get a UFC title shot against the winner of the next heavyweight fight. Do you think it would be a wise idea if WWE keeps the title on him going into this UFC fight that he might be having?
Why not? Why not? How would it hurt WWE if, in either way, if they kept the title on him and he went in and didn't win in the UFC? He'd still be a draw. He might even be more of a draw. And then they can use that to take the belt off of him and let somebody else beat him. Which could create more interest, and there's a million things they can do with that. Either way, I don't think it would be an issue to leave it on him. I don't know why they would go out of their way to take it off of him before he went into the UFC.
Do you think there's going to be more crossover stars in the future? We've seen Ronda Rousey's success.
I don't know. It'd be interesting to see. UFC is. Every form of fighting is different from the standpoint that it has different timing, distance, and footwork. And, certain people might be able to adapt and make that crossover. But let's be honest. I mean, what guy in UFC right now would you want to see in WWE that has that appeal?
Me personally, nobody. So.
Exactly. There's really nobody. There's not another Brock Lesnar. There's not another Ronda Rousey. And until there'll be one, but that really is the downfall for UFC, is that they'll get somebody that they've built that finally is a draw, and then they get bopped and get cut off, and Chuck Liddell, awesome. What happened? started losing. What happened is a draw. Gone. You know, and it just goes down the list. I mean, they burn through them so fast. You know, it's tough because the guys, you know, they fight more frequently than boxers do, so they have more of a likelihood of, you know, losing those key matches and then killing that attraction, killing that heat. And once you kill that heat, they've got to be on a certain level to be able to carry that over and cross over into WWE, and vice versa. And you know, I don't think it's going to stop, but I think it's going to get rarer that you're going to see it.
And what do you think of WWE's current recruiting practices, where it's CrossFit athletes, ex-football players, amateur wrestlers, a lot of people that may not actually ever get into wrestling if it wasn't for a development contract being given right away? Do you think they'll have the same passion to be able to stick with the business in the long haul?
Well, I hope that they have the same passion, because that's what it's going to take for them to succeed. I don't care how. I've seen, I don't know how many people that have all the talent, all the charisma, all the athletic ability, all the cosmetic appearance, the ability on the microphone, the adeptness in the ring, and they don't have the passion to perform. And we've got a long list of those guys in WWE that have been there and come and gone. And you know, I understand you know, it's a law of averages. It's just the numbers. That if you bring in a certain number of them, a certain number are going to not work because of that lack of passion. But that one or two that you do get that do pick it up, like a Kurt Angle or Brock Lesnar, etc., then you're going to have those guys that you can market and use as attractions and build around the rest of the roster. So I guess they're just throwing out a wide net, as wide as possible, to pull in as many as they can and then start paring them down as they go.
I know you had a hand in Lashley's training. Are you happy to see him back with WWE?
I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled with Bobby Lashley being back in WWE, because we had a conversation in TNA. You know, it was one night where he was about to go out and do a promo, and I made some comments and suggestions to him, and then all of a sudden he had found his voice. He had found who he was. You could see it, you could feel it, you could hear it when he spoke. And when he came back, I told him, I said, I don't know why you're here. I don't know why you're not in WWE, because you and Brock Lesnar would be a money match, because you're the only one that physically, visually looks like he could stand a chance. And not to mention, you have your own background in mixed martial arts and Bellator that you're still performing in and fighting in, and that's him being in his understanding and feeling of who he is and his ability to cut a promo on the mic. He and Brock Lesnar would be money.
And what's going on with your acting career? Are you still taking acting jobs?
I'm still taking acting jobs. There's a potential film coming up. It's a special film over in England that deals with Alzheimer's, and is, you know, I think the majority of the proceeds that whatever the film garners will go to the Alzheimer's Foundation. And had a couple of other roles that I was offered, one in Australia, and I just haven't had an opportunity to go and take advantage of these and act, because I've just been so involved with OVW lately, and collar and elbow. I've been dealing with that a lot, and then wrestling myself. Still just been keeping too busy to actually take the time to get out and do the acting as much as I want.
You want to tell us about your Collar and Elbow company?
Collar and Elbow is, you can go to collarandelbowbrand.com. Collar and Elbow is basically trying to create a wrestling brand, much like Under Armour is for, kind of encapsulates football and the passion that football fans have. Nike kind of does that for basketball, kind of track. You know, kind of felt like wrestling in general, not just professional wrestling, but wrestling in general didn't have that. And I mean, let's face it, we're all fans of wrestling. I'm so much of a fan. I've been doing it for 36 years and still watch it, still enjoy it, still love it, still have a passion for it, to the point where I bought a goddamn company, and out of my mind. So you can't say I'm not a fan of wrestling. And I wanted to, we wanted to create a wrestling brand that, you could wear clothing that kind of showed that your passion for it. You could wear it out. We could try to come up with designs you could wear it out in public, and not feel self-conscious. I mean, any grown man is not going to want to wear the face of another grown man on his chest, like a lot of wrestling merchandise is. Just weird. But hey, if you like doing that, that's your business. And you don't want to wear, wrestling merchandise that you're in mixed company, and you got the jerk who comes up, oh, well, you like that? That's fake. And it's like, well, thanks, Agatha Christie, you figured that out. Let's call Angela Lansbury. She doesn't need a job on Murder, She Wrote anymore with you solving mysteries like that. We all know it's fake. We enjoy it. And you can wear this, wear it anywhere you want. Nobody, they'll just say, hey, that's a cool shirt, or that's a cool outfit. But if you're a wrestling fan, you'll see it, you'll know it, it'll be something you can share, and you'll want to get it. And we use really high-end, high-quality clothing. The shirts and etc. are really nice, and they're not just the thick, heavy cotton, Gildan type of stuff. They're really the very high-end type of stuff that we do. And you can always round up your purchase, because we're here at the Cauliflower Alley Club. We always we allow them to round up their purchase, and those proceeds get contributed to Cauliflower Alley Club, which I don't know how much we've contributed since we started, but
yeah, I mean, well over $1,000.
Over $1,000 from the purchases we've contributed to Cauliflower Alley Club and their charitable endeavors. And we've got a new line that's military inspired, and a portion of the proceeds from all of that will go to the American Legion for the veterans and from the services.
And you're obviously have OVW now, so I guess your main school is going to be there.
The main school will be there. I still have 4 affiliate schools, Al Snow's Wrestling Academy, or ASWA, in Sussex, London, Cheshire, and the Midlands in the UK. And then I have 1 in Romania, 1 in Denmark, 1 in Portugal, 1 in Greece, and 1 in Chile, in Santiago, and I'm going over in June because we're going to open one up in Concepcion.
How do you have any free time?
I don't have a whole lot right now. So I'm kind of.
What does your wife think of all these projects you keep taking up?
My wife's awesome. She really truly is. I'm not just saying that to put her over. She's the best, and she she understands, and I make an effort when I'm home to be with her and make up for time, but just sometimes recently in the last few weeks it's been pretty hairy because I've just been I've been going literally every day. I'll be either traveling somewhere, or I'm doing something with OVW, or I'm getting involved with boxing events and in that too. Because why not? And just go
as a promoter.
Yeah. So why not have more? I'm not going to box. Are you out of your mind? That's not going to happen. I did that. I did stuff like that years ago. I don't care what anybody says. I don't care how tough you are. Nobody likes to get hit in the face, and I don't either. So I'm not going to stand there and do boxing. I'll promote it. I'll produce it, but I'm not gonna get in the ring.
Are those events going to be in Kentucky?
Yeah.
At the OVW arena?
We'll have some of the amateur shows at the OVW arena, and then some of the bigger shows at some other venues.
So you're very busy. Where can people follow you on social media?
People can follow me at The Real Al Snow on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, because there were some fakes, and like I say, I'll always notify them and go, look, you're going to fake being a celebrity, raise the bar. Well, why be me? Come on, you can do better. So they can follow me there. You can go to collarandelbowbrand.com, and you can go to OVWrestling.com, and you can watch the shows that we tape for television, broadcast television every week.
And I assume maybe at some point you're going to have an open tryout for people that want to come and show themselves.
Yeah, for Ohio Valley, yes, we will definitely be having it, because I need to bolster up the roster I've got some ideas. Going to bring in some more experienced people that are close by, so that I can integrate them, because I can't operate like an independent wrestling promotion. There's a difference. An independent wrestling promotion can bring in Billy Gunn for one night, and that's great because he's a great attraction. He'll draw an audience. I need to bring in a Billy Gunn and integrate him into the television show, and as if he's a part of that roster, so that it elevates the entire roster, so that he can go out and perform not just on that television show and not just on that one show that week, but on 2 or 3 shows that week, and then television next week, and then 2 or 3 shows the following week, and then television the next week, and 2 or 3 shows. Otherwise, you know, he's great for an occasional special appearance, but I need to integrate and be able to build around some of these more experienced wrestlers that live a little closer and can be there on a regular or even semi-regular basis.
Is there a whole writing team, or are you the main one behind the book?
I'm the main one behind it. I always have been. When I was there with TNA, I was the main one behind it. When I was there with WWE, when I took over from Greg Gagne, I was the main one behind it. But I have a couple of assistants that help, and I tell all the talent all the time, you know, to contribute, to give ideas, and sincerely, there are no politics. I try to explain this to everybody. When you're writing or you're booking TV, I like to say booking because I don't really write, I book TV. You get a vision. It's like putting together a picture puzzle, but you don't have a lid with a picture on it, and you don't have edge pieces. You literally have to construct everything from scratch. And for whatever reason, you can't verbalize it, but you get an idea, you get a vision that, hey, you know what's going to sell right now that's really going to draw an audience is I need to make a picture of a horse. I don't know what kind of horse, I don't know what color horse, I don't know where it needs to be standing, but I need to make as defined and clear a picture of a horse. That's what's going to draw the audience for right now. So the wrestlers are nothing more than puzzle pieces that I got to place in that to make that picture. And the more defined and the more they are willing to be the piece that they need to be for me to make that picture for that time, the more clear and the more I can make it for the audience that now draws them in. So I'm trying to make a picture, and it ends up starting to develop into a white horse with a flowing mane and tail, standing on 3 of its legs with one pulled up in a beautiful field, sunlit, with wooden fences. And I need you to be the hoof on the foot that's holding up. I mean, you don't want to be the hoof. Nobody wants to be the hoof. Nobody wants to be a horse toenail. You know, that's not special. You want to be the mane. You want to be the long flowing mane. You want to be the spotlight. But if I try to put you in there, you don't fit right now. It doesn't work. So now the whole picture's screwed up because I can't have a 3-footed horse. So now I can't make the horse because you don't want to cooperate, because you feel like you need to be something else. What you fail to see and understand, because you'll blame me and say, well, you're just putting so-and-so in there in the main because you like him, or blah, blah, blah. I'm nothing further from the truth. I hate all of them. It's not that. I'm putting that person there because they fit there right now. But you don't understand that the next time we put together a picture puzzle, because I got to make another one. I have to make that one, then I got to move and make another one. I'm going to make a pirate ship. And you just happen to be the thing that's going to be the captain. And you're going to be the centerpiece of that pirate ship. And I can do that. But I need you to be the piece of the puzzle at that time for that reason, so that the next time I make a picture, you fit in a different place and you take a more prominent role. But guys and girls, that's the management part of, that's the hardest part of booking, is trying to get them to understand and do the right business at the right time for the right reasons, to fit in the right space, to make the best picture that will draw the biggest audience. And that really is ultimately what a booker, not a writer, does, is they try to construct that and utilize the roster in the best possible way that benefits everyone, not just that singular person.
And you mentioned you took over from Greg Gagne. That reminds me, like, what was his heat all about? Because
I'm not sure. I'm not really sure. I have no idea. I know that Greg was brought in, and there was, you know, he was always nervous and a little unsettled, and Greg Gagne's a great guy. He's very funny and, you know, a wealth of experience. But, you know, it just didn't seem like it was meant to be right from the start. It just seemed like there was a bend towards him not being there or something. And for what reasons, I'm not privy to. I don't know. Just anything I would say would just be speculation and assumption. I mean, I just couldn't tell you. But, you know, it didn't work, and, you know, Greg went on. WWE bought the AWA library, so it's not like I think he suffered that badly. And he just didn't get to stay in the business and be a part of something he enjoyed.
And last question is a fan question, and they wanted to know your recollections of your involvement with Windy City Wrestling's formative years.
Windy City Wrestling with Sam DeCero. I mean, man, talk about a guy. He was in the right place at the right time. You know, he got really good television. He called it Windy City Wrestling, WCW. He was able to then, you know, he was able to take a lawsuit against WCW, and you know, I mean, Sam's a great guy, but he's one of those that you could literally step in a bucket of shit and come out smelling like a rose. And I remember when they were first starting, like, Windy City was hot. The school was packed. I don't know how many students they had, and had a lot of talented individuals there. A lot of really talented, good-looking guys that were, you know, and that TV was doing great ratings. They were drawing good houses. They ran the International Amphitheater on an annual basis, the Battle of the Belts, which was awesome because Mickey Doyle and I got brought in and got to work in the International Amphitheater. And for those that don't know, the International Amphitheater in the United States was the birthplace of television wrestling on the old Dumont network. They would film it there and then send it out, broadcast it out to all across the United States. There was a building right prior to that, but then it went to the International Amphitheater. So, and I remember working on that show in a tag match with Mickey and I, and it was sold out. I mean, it was packed to the rafters, you know. And any show that we went on, he was drawing really good houses. I mean, he was doing good business, you know. And then the business started to drop off, and, you know, but Sam, he's a survivor. He went on and did other things. I don't think he's doing any wrestling promoting anymore. I haven't seen or heard of him anymore.
And finally, any closing remarks you'd like to make to end this off?
Any closing remarks I would like to make is just thank you to all the fans for being fans. Without them, you know, we would not get to do what we love to do. You know, I have nothing but the absolute ultimate appreciation for each and every person who loves wrestling. Don't want that misunderstood, that when I hear me saying what I say, it's not directed to the fans. And I think the fans think I'm speaking to them. I'm not. I'm speaking to the wrestlers. I'm speaking to the performers. Because the wrestling business, at the end of the day, no ifs, ands, or buts, the wrestling business is the wrestler's business. It belongs to them. And it should always be in their hands, because they're the artist. They're the person who paints the pictures. And if they go at the whim of the general public, then that picture constantly is being dictated and changed by an opinion, as opposed to them doing it now from their heart and doing it from the passion they hold, and it now communicating to a broader audience. It's being done from here to appease just an opinion. And that's all I've ever said. Maybe I think a lot of people misconstrue it and think that I'm speaking to the fans or that I'm against the fans. Nothing could be further from the truth. It's allowing the wrestlers to take control back of the very art form that they are in charge of creating for the audience, and the audience allowing them to do that and enjoying what it is that they've done. And if they don't like it, they can voice their opinion, but then you know, but understand that it's taken in context. It doesn't live in a bubble. It's a piece of an entire story. It's just like when you're reading a book and you don't like one chapter of the book, but you now judge the whole book on that one chapter, or you judge it on that one paragraph, or that one sentence. And that's what wrestling fans are doing. And I encourage them to stop being pseudo-experts for their own sake and go back to just watching it and enjoying it for what it is, instead of trying to outthink those that are behind the scenes and assuming just because you have information and you've watched for a certain period of time that you now have a commensurate amount of knowledge as the person who's actually in the ring doing what he's doing. Because you don't. That's not put down to the fan. It's just a fact. If you wanted to be a licensed physician, you would have to attend medical school from anywhere from 7 to what, 10 or 11 years, depending on your specialty. And then once you finish that and you graduate, are you a licensed physician? No. You have to go to residency, which runs anywhere from 3 to 6 years based on your specialty. Residency is where it's supervised experience that now gets coupled with all of the information you got. Only then do you actually become a licensed physician to where you can practice medicine. Not until you have gotten that experience are you allowed to practice medicine on your own. So if that works for that field, why doesn't that apply to wrestling? And I want the fans to understand that so that they can go back and just enjoy it, as opposed to always getting angry and hating what happens or getting so frustrated. I mean, hey, if that's what you want to do, and that's how you enjoy watching it, feel free to do it. But the performers need to take the control back and be the people who drive the bus.